Und nicht zuletzt begrüße ich unseren besonderen Gast des heutigen Abends, Professor James Giordano von der Georgetown University in Washington. Ich stelle Professor Giordano kurz vor und stelle ihn auf Deutsch vor, weil er eigentlich ganz gut Deutsch auch sprechen kann. Ich erzähle ein bisschen was zu ihm. Er ist, wie gesagt, Professor an der Georgetown University und zwar in den Departments für Neurologie und Biochemie. Er ist auch Leiter des Studienprogramms für Neuroethik an der Georgetown University und er ist Vorsitzender des Unterprogramms für militärische Medizinethik am Medical Center der Georgetown University. Er ist Autor von 335 Peer-Review-Publikationen, 7 Büchern und 40 Governmental Reports zu Wissenschaft, Technik und Biosicherheit. Als Wissenschaftler ist er auch in Europa aktiv. Er ist gewähltes Mitglied der Europäischen Akademie der Wissenschaften und Künste. Er ist Fellow der Royal Society of Medicine in Großbritannien und auch Fulbright Professorial Fellow. Als Wissenschaftler berät er das Verteidigungsministerium der USA. So ist er Senior Science Advisory Fellow der SMA Branch des Joint Staff des Pentagons. Er war Teil der Covid Response Task Force des Pentagons, als die Covid-Pandemie losging, als beratender Experte für biomedizinische und ethische Fragen. Professor Giordano ist auch ehemaliger Marineoffizier. Er hat bei der US Navy und Marine Corps gedient, unter anderem auch als Luftfahrtphysiologe und als Forschungspsychologe. Mit diesem Hintergrund ist er Senior Fellow für Wissenschaft, Technik, Biosecurity und Ethik an der US Naval Academy und an der US Naval War College. Er ist Direktor des Institute for Biodefense Research, einem Washington Think Tank. Und er ist auch Mitglied des Neuroethics Legal and Social Issues Advisory Panels von DARPA, der Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Er ist auch beim IEEE aktiv, dem Berufsverband der Ingenieure, als Chair Emeritus des Neuroethik-Projekts der IEEE Brain Initiative. In Europa ist er Taskleader der Working Group on Dual Use beim Human Brain Project der Europäischen Union. Ich kenne ihn aus meiner Zeit an der Hochschule Coburg. Zumindest vor der Pandemie kam er jedes Jahr mehrmals an die Hochschule Coburg als Distinguished Visiting Professor für Neurowissenschaften, Gesundheitsförderung und Ethik. Zusammen haben wir gemeinsame Lehrveranstaltungen unterrichtet, eine Konferenz veranstaltet und Professor Giordano hat mich auch 3-mal in meinem damaligen Philosophischen Café in Coburg besucht, 3 Vorträge gehalten. Ich schätze seine Bereitschaft, wichtige ethische Fragen der Biotechnik in der Öffentlichkeit zu diskutieren und freue mich für seine Offenheit, mit der OTH zusammenzuarbeiten und auch für diesen Besuch des Philosophischen Cafés. Jim, a very warm welcome to the OTH Regensburg and thank you so much for giving this talk today and for discussing with us today.
Ja, nein, das ist wirklich meine Ehre und freut mich hier zu sein. Ja, natürlich, diesen ganzen Vortrag auf Englisch, ja, und das ist meine Muttersprache und das ist wirklich einfacher für mich. Aber können wir diese Fragen und Diskussionen auf Deutsch haben? Das ist bei mir total okay, aber muss ich wirklich, tut mir leid. Aber ich bin sehr, sehr aus den Übungen. Normalerweise für den ganzen Monat Dezember komme ich in Deutschland, Coburg und so weiter und so, habe ich wirklich gute Gelegenheit, diese Vorträge zu halten und zu unterrichten und so weiter. Aber das sind die Kurve zeigt, das ist kein mehr. Und so, das ist warum ich bin sehr aus den Übungen wieder. Tut mir sehr, sehr leid. Also mein Deutsch ist wirklich ein bisschen schlimm. Aber meine Englisch nicht auch so gut ist, dass I'm a New Yorker und so. Ich habe einen wirklich dicke und stark New Yorkischen Akzent, wenn ich Englisch spreche. Und so, I will now speak in English and hopefully you can understand my New Yorkese accent. So, thank you all. Of course, my work has been funded by a number of organizations and I thank each and all of them. It's important to note that funding because what it demonstrates is that there are a variety of institutions, organizations, various philanthropies worldwide that are interested in these topics, which in a larger sense bespeaks their concerns. Let's begin from the beginning. I mean, realistically, if we look at human enterprise, human effort, human work, what we see is that humans are tool users. We begin with the simple tools of our own observation, our ability to sense and perceive our environment, And from that, we develop a relative set of beliefs and understandings, and they go hand in hand. But what also goes hand in hand is the interaction between the tools we have and use and the theories that we create about the world we live in. In other words, we go from our tools to our theories, and then we examine our theories both with the tools we have and then the new tools we make. And so what we see is that we go from tool to theory, theory to tool, and then we go from the tasks at hand. In other words, what jobs should we do? Must we do? Can we do? Those words are not esoteric. What jobs? Was Arbeit können wir und sollten wir machen? Und sie sind nicht dasselbe. Was können wir machen? Ja, das ist unsere Fähigkeit und Fähigkeiten durch diese Werkzeuge und so weiter und mit diesen Theorien. Aber ist das recht und gut? Ich meine, cui malo, cui bono, so sagen wir auf Latein. Who is benefited? Who is harmed? Now and later. Jetzt und auch in Zukunft. And this is important because if we look at data, big data, decision learning, machine learning, we can situate this within the larger construct of iterative developmental artificial intelligence. As we see here, we go from deep learning methods and tools to machine learning, which ultimately contributes to some form of soft and then ultimately harder and harder artificial intelligence. And the applications are multifold. My area of interest and specialization, meine Schwerpunkt, das ist in Neurowissenschaft, Biomedizin zum Beispiel. Aber nicht nur. Das ist wirklich das biopsychosoziale Realität des Menschen, ja? We are biopsychosocial creatures, and our biology is enacted in our social ecologies. And we use these tools not only to construct theories, but to engage various tasks of knowledge and of action. But think about this for a moment. Are we secure? Are we safe with the knowledge we have? Because that knowledge allows us to navigate these geographies of possibility of what we may do and what may happen to us. Let me give you an example. It is now wintertime, and you are in beautiful Regensburg, and you have many lakes in Regensburg, in your nearby forests. And you come upon a beautiful lake, and you think, I would like to cross that lake to get to the other side. Think how you think. You must first think, well, it is winter, so perhaps the lake is frozen. At what temperature does water freeze? Das ist null. How long has this been frozen? How hard is the ice? Will it support me? What happens if I fall through the ice? Will I survive? The idea of using information in ways that affect our thoughts, our emotions, our decisions, and our actions is important to understand the complexity of use and effect that big data and various forms of machine learning and artificial intelligence have upon the human condition both for our flourishing and capabilities, and in many ways for our safety and survival. And this is becoming ever more important and critical in the literal sense, critical in that it is essential, notwendig, kritisch, but also critical in that it is a point of critique and criticism. Do we use these tools correctly? Are we using these tools in ways that are ethically sound? By what definition of ethically sound are we using these tools? And are we safe in using these tools in these ways? The advances that are occurring in the science and technology are quasi-linear. Quasi-linear. What we mean by quasi-linear is that they go through periods of intense vertical growth, followed by periods of differential use. But if we put together all of the domains and dimensions of scientific and technical progress in data and computational science and technology, so sagen wir hier, DCST, data and computational science and technology, we see that this is not a simple summative effect, but actually an integral function, whereby increasing capability of the science and the technology produces increasing accuracy, diversity, scalability and size, speed, volume, and workability. Workability, Machbarkeit, Fähigkeit, Möglichkeit, Gelegenheiten. Was können wir mit diesen Werkzeugen machen? In Realität, in Praxis, täglich, im Realwelt, in Praxis. Part of the reason for this quasi-linear expansion is the iterative and progressive integration, functional integration of sciences and technology that brings together the physical sciences and engineering, the natural sciences, the social sciences and humanities, and each and all of these rely upon big data. Big data is therefore both a tool to be used in this way and the task of integrative scientific convergence to generate large volumes of data and to develop methods to use large volumes of data to increase the data validity. Sozusagen sind diese Daten gut, richtig, echt. Veridicality, sind sie wahr, are they truthful? Viability, sind sie nützlich? Volume, wie groß sind diese Daten? Velocities, die Hochgeschwindigkeiten. Und wenn alles zusammenkommen, denn das ist dieses Wert. So wichtig und wertig ist Big Data als Arbeit, Methode und Werkzeug, that it stands alone as what we say in English is a force multiplier or force capacitator for science and engineering. It is a catalyst. An example of that is the simple representation of the volume and speed of data processing that is currently available and currently achievable. If we look at performance development curves, as shown here on the right, we see once again that when plotted across correlation efficient gradients, looking at basically these equations of correlation of capability and time, here too, we see linear capabilities as relate to the sum of these progresses and various subprogrammatic abilities that these technologies and methods confer. So what we're talking about at this point is working from the gigabyte to terabyte range, and within the next 5 to 10 years, achieving supra-terabyte into the petabyte and perhaps beyond range. All of these data requiring processing mechanisms and processing technologies to make sense of what these data provide. But this becomes important because if we look to the future, we must also confront the relative conundrum of future forecasting. If we look here below, what we see is something referred to as the predictability horizon. Sozusagen, wie klar können wir in Zukunft sehen, diese Werkzeuge, Technologie, Wissenschaft und so weiter. Und sind wir sicher, diese sind die Möglichkeiten, Effekte, Ergebnisse und so weiter, wenn und als wir in Zukunft schauen. Und hier, das ist ein Dilemmata. Bitte gucken Sie mal. We have 3 vistas. Zuerst, the vista of probability. In other words, from the present to the next 5 years, these things will very probably become real because they are already in progress in development, realization, and use. But once we realize these probabilities, we open a new horizon of possibilities. Sozusagen, wenn wir hier stehen, hier zum Beispiel in 5 Jahren in Zukunft, dann öffnen wir diesen ganz neuen Horizont der Möglichkeiten für die folgenden 15 und 15 Jahren in Zukunft. Ein Schritt, noch ein Schritt, vorwärts und so weiter und so weiter. This vista of possibility, wie ist das Möglichkeit, Gelegenheit und so weiter, is to 15 years in the future. Bis 15 Jahren vorwärts in Zukunft. But let's think then, when we stand here at this 15-year point, now we may see the potential of future capabilities to the 30-year point. It is very difficult to actually forecast and plan this far ahead. Why? Look, what we see is as we go farther into the future, this area, which is the percentage of possible developments, applications, and uses, increases. This effect is referred to as fractal diffusion of intents and effects. In other words, the longer a technology and scientific method is, quote, out there, ist draußen, mehr die Gelegenheiten, Möglichkeiten kennen wir diese Wissenschaft, Technologie und so weiter für anderen benutzen, entwickeln. Das ist klar. The longer we have a tool and the more tools we make, the more diversified are the potential applications of those tools in the social ecology. It is very often the social environment and cultures that determine the diffusion of intent and effects. Well, clearly what we know is that there are a number of issues requirements, necessities that are currently both challenges to the science and technology and opportunities for its continued expansion and development. Some of these issues include the need for very large volume data banks, the need for individual and population data tiers, data banks, data repositories, the potential and reality to integrate data across these levels, dimensions, and domains, the need for continuous data input, the need for real-time and continuous data access and use. And if we're going to use these data in ways that are precise and that can be personalized to maximize the benefit for individuals and collective groups, then much of these data must be non-anonymous. In other words, much of these data must be relevant and applicable to individual identities. Well, how have we met these challenges and opportunities? Through the tools of big data that have allowed us to maximize storage and retrieval, have allowed us parallel computing, and here we see the real need for machine learning, decision technologies, and ultimately artificial intelligence. We have seen scalable and customizable big data methods and tools. And once again, we see that there is increasing consideration for these data to be accessed and shared among potential user groups. That sharing, that access speaks to what these data allow. They allow data to be gained, gathered, and tracked, monitored across domains, literally from the cellular to the social, across levels, individual, groups, populations, weltweit, across geographies. Wenn etwas weltweit ist, dann natürlich across geographies. Das ist in Definition weltweit. Across time. Data from the past, data from the present, and predictive data for the future. And to use these data in ways that are both comparative, but also normative, to establish standards, norms, and values. Right now, 2022, we can match individual data retrospectively and prospectively. This is what is referred to as a data pyramid. A data pyramid. It allows us to aggregate, to group, to bring together point data, Punktdaten, durch und mit Data und Daten die ganze Lebensspanne in Vergangenheit, Gegenwärtige. So können wir etwas in Zukunft Spekulation machen. Und können wir diese heutzutage machen? Mit allen den Methoden, Werkzeuge und so weiter. Was haben wir jetzt? Aber das ist nicht nur eine Möglichkeit und Gelegenheit und Fähigkeit für diese individuellen Big Data, angewandte Benutzung und so weiter. Aber auch können wir diese als System machen. und benutzen. Hier, we can take these individual data, plot them and use them durch Leben- und Zeitspannen, match them to cohort data and information, and then match, plot, and compare them to the data of a variety of populations, weltweit. But is it just comparison? No. Very often we use these data to establish normative indices, normative basis, normative Grundlage. Das ist nicht nur für eine Öffentlichkeit, aber auch das ist für die Gruppen, Kollektive und auch für die Individuellen. Ja, können wir mit diesen Daten können wir diese Vergleichen machen? Ja, natürlich. Aber auch diese normative Rahmen können wir diese Daten dafür benutzen. How can we link these data? This has sometimes been referred to as a von Müller nodogram, a von Müller nodogram. Each one of these nodes, diese kleine Kreis, was sehen wir hier, are actually three-dimensional domains of massive data that are currently available. Data about our genetics, data about our biological current state, in other words, real-time biological data, historical data from our various records, inclusive of our medical records, that can be, quote, plotted and organized with our various social contacts, our economic contacts and economic engagements, our use of various media, and our behaviors. All of these data are currently available for most of us. And the beauty of the von Müller nodogram is that it is not a static depiction, but each one of these spheres represents real-time data input and acquisition that can be compared, utilized, and correlated with each of the other domains of data so as to create a systemic data representation of individuals and individuals in groups. Wir können diese jetzt machen. Mit den Werkzeugen, das haben wir jetzt. Zum Beispiel, at Georgetown, we have a particular system for just this type of massive data acquisition, assimilation, and use. It is called Aves Terra. Aves Terra. The system uses, was heißen wir auf Englisch, a black box approach. Schwarzkastenaufsatz. Black box approach. Data come into the system, and the system can generate patterns of data, either agnostically, in other words, we do not tell the system what patterns to look for, or gnostically. We dictate to the system, look for these particular patterns. And we can use patterns of individual genomics, biology, historical data, economics, personal contacts, media use, and behaviors in ways that are both descriptive, what is an individual doing now, and what have they done in the past, as well as ways that are predictive. What allows us to do this is the iterative and progressive use of various forms of machine learning, decision technologies, and by integrating those approaches together, some form of artificial intelligence. There are basically two categories of artificial intelligence, and they are not mutually exclusive. Soft artificial intelligence is oriented to making computers more sophisticated in solving those particular issues, questions, and problems that are important to the task at hand. Hard AI, hard artificial intelligence, essentially is oriented towards making computers do what humans do. So here, it is not just a tool, it is a collaborator, ein Zusammenarbeiter, ein Mitarbeiter, ein Kollege. Aber das ist eine Maschine. Wie sollen wir diese Maschine anerkennen? Können wir das eine Beziehung mit dieser Maschine machen? Und wie? Wie ist das möglich? Ist das möglich? Und was ist das Beziehung? How do we use soft and hard AI to not only address problems, but perhaps to facilitate our decisions? Well, part of the answer to those questions is found in those areas, those groups, those collectives, those cultures that are using AI and big data. That's not hard to understand. I mean, listen, if what we're doing is trying to make computers more sophisticated to address and resolve human questions, human issues, human problems, and we're perhaps developing computers to do certain things that humans do, the question then is, what humans? We must appreciate the anthropological reality that humans are truly not homogeneous in their bio, psycho, social orientations and activities. Humans cluster into groups. Those groups form collectives, and those full collectives are the sources of culture. Culture. And here I use that word literally. Think, for example, of a petri dish in a laboratory in which we grow some microbe. It is both a forum, a medium to develop that expression, and it establishes a set of parameters, constraints, or freedoms for that developing expression to express further and to progress or to be constrained. That is what culture does. Culture provides the needs, the goals, the values, the ethos of a group of individuals that is important to their survival and their flourishing. So it becomes critical for us to appreciate that these efforts, these approaches in data, computational science, and technology are not monocultural. They are not uninational. They are increasingly global and multinational, as evidenced by current trends and projected trends in the development of data and computational science and technology on the world stage. For example, China is currently on pace. China is currently online. They have a trajectory and Flugfahrt to outspend both the United States and the European Union by approximately an order of magnitude over the next 10 years, with a predicted fast 70% increase in research, Development, Test and Evaluation, R, D, T und E, bis 2025. Das ist nur 3 Jahre in Zukunft. Das ist riesig, riesig. And economically, that will represent close to a 50 to 53% market share in the global data and computational science markets. We can see this, for example, in the graph here on the right. Interestingly, USA, China, Deutschland, they're the top 3. But let us not think that it is only China, Germany, US, and some EU nations. Realistically, we know that there are a number of others over the next 5 to 10 years that have defined programs in data and computational science and technology that are highly expansive and rapidly growing. Russia, Iran, North Korea, but also virtual nations that are using computational sciences to establish virtual sovereignties. And increasingly, non-state actors can establish themselves as relatively sovereign entities within the cyberspace. So the technology itself is capable of developing its own ecology, its own environments, and its own politics. All of these issues demand ongoing levels of relative security to be able to maximize the benefit of the technology and minimize its burdens, risks, and potential harms. What are these issues and risks? Well, basically, they are, in fact, twofold. First, those that are specific to the technology. So to say, what is it about this technology that might be risky? Well, there are essentially 4 principal factors. Number 1, there are a variety of unknowns that go along with this technology. For example, what do we really know about the quantum domain? And what might quantum computing incur, evoke, and effect? What are the actual capabilities and the limitations of this science and technology? And how certain and confident are we about these capabilities and limitations? Are we using these tools and methods in ways that are valid and therefore viable? And what if the technology gets away from us? In other words, what if the technology becomes so functional that it eludes human control? We're not talking Terminator scenarios or Ray Kurzweil singularities here. We're talking that very often this type of technology can develop domains that exist beyond human oversight and perhaps human control. And as a consequence, we only recognize those domains, those dimensions, and those effects after the fact. This is sometimes referred to as the Collingridge dilemma, in that we won't know unless we go. Wir können das nicht wissen, aber müssen wir denn vorwärts gehen? Und das ist der einzige Weg, das können wir das wissen. Es muss entwickeln, so denn können wir das klar sehen. Aber das ist eine Dilemmata, nicht wahr? Ich meine, ja, vielleicht, das ist gefährlich, vorwärts zu gehen. Und was denn ist Gefahr? Aber wir können das nicht wissen, dann müssen wir gehen, das zu wissen. Does a simple precautionary principle, ein einfaches Vorsichtsprinzip, ist das nützlich? Nee, not really. Why? Because the risks will always be greater than the benefits. Why? Because the longer that a technique, tool, or method is available and out there, is available to a broader group of users, the greater the potential diversity of its uses and effects. The original intent may be a defined benefit, but that intent can be diffused. That intent can be, in fact, watered down, lessened across various diffused and diverse uses. So a simple precautionary principle, ein Einfachvorsichtsprinzip, that says, if the risk is greater than the benefit, don't do it, does not apply. But a detailed precautionary or preparedness principle might. Why? Because we must appreciate the social issues and risks that this technology fosters. One is whether these systems are truly autonomous or not, and whether the developers and users of the technology are autonomous or are interactive and cooperative with each other. Awareness, understanding, and consent to use these technologies in various social arrangements and social applications. Issues of justice. Who will get the benefits of these technologies and who will not? And ultimately, what will we use these technologies for? Of course, you understand that these technologies and methods have great value in various applications of national security, intelligence, and defense. And this then, of course, further opens up the opportunities as well as the dangers of dual use. So this then brings us to the critical questions. What do we do with the information and capability we have? What do we do about the information and capability we don't? Given what can be done, how do we and who should decide what should be done? And can we really do what we decide we should? But there are more issues and caveats when it comes to big data as it is used with artificial intelligence. What it basically boils down to is these data may be hackable. These data may be manipulable. Access to these data, misuse of these data can be problematic for individual and collective security and safety. And when we think about the use of artificially intelligent systems to mine, to collect, to assimilate, synthesize, and use these data, we must ask, whence human engagement? How will humans be involved? Here, what we see is that there are differing what we call construct values of how useful the system is with or without human involvement. We must also appreciate what are the ethics and norms of data and artificial intelligence science, and what are various groups using these tools and methods to do. If we just consider the first aspect, in other words, what we call human looping, where on the circle, wo in der Kreis, sind die Menschen? In, am, oder draußen? Humans in the loop, where humans interact continuously with the machine systems for data acquisition, synthesis, and artificially intelligent use. Humans on the loop, where humans just monitor the progress and direction, or humans completely out of the loop, where humans establish the machine systems to be able to monitor and perform on their own, free of human bias, of human disposition, and of human prejudice. Each one of these has been advocated to be beneficial. For example, we in the United States and much of Europe really value humans in the loop and on the loop. But that is not universal. For example, much of the work being conducted in China involves machine systems of big data and artificial intelligence, where humans are out of the loop once the systems have been established. How is it then that we can have interoperability? Can these systems effectively work together, or are they in conflict? And the conflicts and tensions are evident. Are we using these data and artificial intelligence systems in ways that are preventive and protective for our public health? Or are we using these in ways that in some way intrude upon our privacy, affect our personal liberties and rights, and in fact may be punitive and problematic? So it becomes important then to consider big data and artificial intelligence ethics on a multinational scale. To do so, we have argued that any such ethics must be cosmopolitan and aware of all of the different groups, collectives, and cultures that are engaged in developing these methods and tools, must be capable in discrete communities of use, and in so doing, these two things must accommodate, recognize, and be responsive to plural needs, values, norms, and mores. But we must also appreciate the reality that this science and technology is both affected by and directly and indirectly affects economics, politics, and global balances of power. We have developed a risk assessment and mitigation approach whereby the use of any data and computational science and technology should be informed by asking key questions. And here we see them. What science and technologies are available for current use? Why are these sciences and technologies being considered or advocated for use? Who will receive the effects of these science and technologies? When will it be considered? In what algorithm? What protocol? Where? In what locale? In which nation? In which domain? In which settings? And which mechanisms will be in place for the ongoing provision of services and resources, and perhaps revisions and recuperations? The answers to those questions must be framed in what we have called 6C considerations. Considerations for the actual capacities and limitations of the science. Consequences of its use or non-use. What is the character of the use case? What and why are we using this science and technology? In what context are we using it? Is there, and what is, the continuity of research and revision? And will the individuals who are affected by and who use this science and technology give their consent to have their data gathered, accumulated, analyzed, and used? So again, it becomes important in creating this globally relevant design to appreciate cultural diversity in research, development, and use of these various tools and methods. In other words, think of a painter We need to develop a cosmopolitan palette that we can then use to paint the very specific canvases of local and specific and particular use cases. But it becomes somewhat difficult, or at least more complicated, when we deal with national cultures, or at least ideological cultures that differ as regards to how they view and how they use the science and technology in ways that they view to be ethical. Our group, working with our international colleagues, inclusive of our colleagues, for example, at Universität Coburg in Germany, have defined particular methods that set ethical goals, engage what's called a discursive framework, examine what's called an equilibrium of maximum benefit with minimum harm. But this is very, very specific, and I need not go too deeply into this, but rather to describe for you the mechanisms for change and positive change. Our group has stated that mechanisms for change involve 3 Ps, 3 Ps. Eins, Personen as participants in the change process. Number 2, participatory alignment with that process. And number 3, purpose that identifies clear goals, defined outcomes, and affords an administrative and economic base to make these changes occur. How do we put this into practice? Again, more Ps, pragmatic analysis, a preparatory posture, the use of personnel who are perceptive, skeptical, and persistent, the use of prediction modeling, and then ultimately prudence in decisions and actions to inform, guide, and develop policy. But please understand that the call for preparedness is not necessarily a call for prevention. We're not saying don't go forward. We are saying be prepared for any of the forces that might affect each step forward. This is what is referred to as a readiness stance. To be focused, flexible, and fast-moving and adaptive. To recognize and be responsive to both individual as well as collective benefits, for sure, as well as burdens, risks, threats, and harms. This process involves identifying risks, crafting strategies for preemption, prevention, and recuperation, examining the various settings in which big data and AI will be used, creating approaches that are relevant and durable, and maintaining a flexible framework for its use in real-world practice. It is one of the things that we're working to do in our what's called Cyber Smart Center at Georgetown, the Center for Computational and Data Security, Management, Administration, Research, and Training. And we've called for certain preparedness actions. We've called for something called MENA, a Massive Information Non-Discrimination Act. We've called for programmatic security, ongoing surveillance of the field and research, development, test, and evaluation and uses in real-world practice. A need for international and global discourse, dialogue, and dialectical engagement, and training, and that training should remain current, flexible. So I end with a question, perhaps. Quo vadis? Where are we going? Well, what becomes important as our ticket to go forward is, in fact, a reality check. We must have realistic insight to what the science and technology can do. We must have insight and knowledge and be responsive to how the science and technology affects and is affected by economies, ecologies, and cultures. We must anticipate and develop security by design that works to keep these systems and their uses secure. And it becomes important for us to attempt to develop a globally relevant and responsive ethics that can be genuinely and authentically applied to these various situations in multicultural use. So at the end of the day, what we're calling for is reflection, insight, prudence as stepping stones for each step forward of inquiry, invention, and intervention to create these systems and their various capabilities in the range of domains and applications that we have intended. To put it simply, we should measure twice before we make any cuts, because all too often, if we fail to measure, there was no going back. If you're interested in some of the work that my group has done in this area, I provide this bibliography for you, and Professor Kriza can make this available to you. Again, I apologize, all of these manuscripts are in English, but certainly they are available online. And if you would like specific copies, I can provide them for you. And although we have about 30 minutes for question and discussion, if you would like to get in touch with me and you have further questions or comments, please feel free to contact me directly. And this is my email address. So with that, I will stop sharing and I will open up the floor for questions.